republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to everyone, and let us move to the roll call, please.
Mr. Alt?
Here.
Mr. Beistel? Mr. Betts?
Here.
Dr. Fike? Mrs. Kaufman?
Here.
Mrs. Love?
Here.
Mr. Polakowski?
Here.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Paige
Oh,
Weaver?
I'm sorry.
Here.
Davis Simon?
Here.
Okay, there are 8 present and 1 absent of board members and the 2 student representatives. All right, we'll move to citizen comments.
There are no citizen comments this evening.
Okay. We will move to the minutes. Approval of minutes.
It is recommended that the board approve the minutes of the October 3rd and October 10th, 2013 meetings.
For a motion? Ms. Love? Second by Mrs. Kaufman. Motion and a second. No comments or question? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, and the minutes are approved. Business and finance, fund accounts.
It is recommended that the board approve the October 2013 revenue report, expenditure report, bills payable and accounts payable, and the October 2013 treasurer's report.
Motion by Mr. Beistel.
Second.
And a second by Mr. Polakowski. Comments? Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Betts?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0. To new business. Adoption of policy 805, emergency preparedness.
Did you want to lump the policies?
You know
into
what,
one motion?
we discussed these policies at the several discussion sessions. What I'm going to suggest here, I'll take a motion here to adopt B, new business 1 through 4, if there is a motion of that, and then Dr. Molnar will talk about them, and you can still ask questions, and we'll take a roll call vote on them. Do I hear such a motion? Ms. Love makes the motion, and the second is by Ms. Rhodes. So Dr. Molnar, go ahead then and give some explanation.
It is recommended then that the board adopt a revision of policy 805, which is the emergency preparedness policy, a revision of policy 805.1, relations with law enforcement agencies. It is also recommended that the board adopt the revision of policy 849, which is the memorandum of understanding with local law enforcement, and 909, municipal government relations.
Okay. Comments, questions on any of these 4 policies? Okay. Then roll call, please. Then we're voting on all 4 of them.
Mr. Beistel?
Here.
Mr. Betts?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman?
Yes.
Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0. On personnel, again, the first, let's put these in groupings here. Oh, just one question. Dr. Molnar was, I'm speaking to you, Board. Dr. Molnar was suggesting we do not need a personnel executive session because these should not be surprises to you. We discussed these last week. But is there anyone who would like, regarding personnel? You're okay, Jack? Okay.
Good.
Okay. Then let's move on to personnel. We will have a short executive session in regards to legal issues at the end of the meeting. Well, I'm going to suggest here we take the three, P1, 2, and 3. These are all band related. So could I hear a motion to adopt the first three?
You want me to read them first?
Well, let's get it on the floor, and then you can, Mr. Beistel makes the motion. Second by Ms. Rhodes. All right, let's listen to, let's hear what, go ahead, Dr.
All right, it's recommended that the board change Bob Springer's status from Woodward instructor to assistant marching band director for the 2013-14 school year, that the board approve changing Brant Roberts' position from brass instructor to percussion instructor for the 2013-14 school year, and that the board appoint Justin Turpin as brass instructor effective October 1, 2013, at a prorated salary for the 2013-14 school year.
Okay, questions, comments on these three? Roll call, please.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Yes. Mrs. Love? Yes. Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8 and 1 abstention, or 1 absent. All right, we have a number of family medical leave. If you look at your agenda, P1, P4, personnel 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 are all families. So I would entertain a motion to adopt those 4 there. Ms. Love makes the motion, and Ms. Kaufman seconds it. Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
You want me to
I'm
read
sorry.
them?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's hear them. Yes.
It's recommended that the board approve a family medical leave for Angela Ward, 4th grade teacher, from November 12 through January 31, 2014. For Morgan Coleman, 3rd grade teacher, beginning March 12th and ending on May 16, 2014. For 4th grade teacher Aaron DeZambo, March 17th through May 16th, 2014. And for Lila Wilde, from November 8th for a period of 12 weeks or until her doctor releases her to return to work, whichever comes first.
Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kaufman? Yes. Mrs. Love? Yes. Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8 yes and 1 absent. The next, maybe we'll put the next 2 together here. We have, in fact, let's put the next few, let me suggest here, the Spanish teacher is...
I think that one needs to stand on its
So let's
own.
do that one separately, okay?
It's recommended that the board approve an unpaid parental leave for Christina Gabinet, middle school Spanish teacher, beginning on November the 6th, 2013, through the end of the 2013-14 school year.
Motion? Motion from Ms. Rhodes.
Second.
Mr. Polankowski seconds it. Questions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Love? Yes. Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Yes. Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8 yes votes and 1 absent. The 2 long-term, can we put these long-term subs together, Dr. Molnar?
It's recommended that the board employ Mr. John Stevens as a long-term sub for Christina Gabinet, retroactive to the first day of school. He has been in that position. And it is also recommended that the board employ Mr. Richard Martz as a long-term sub for Julie Graff, middle school math teacher, who was previously granted a parental leave.
Is there a motion to adopt those 2?
I'll make a motion.
Polonakowski makes the motion. Second to Mr. Beistel. Questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel? Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Mrs. Love? Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1 absent. We have the day-to-day, let's do that one by itself, the day-to-day substitute list.
Sure. It is recommended that the board approve the additions to the day-to-day substitute list.
Moved by Ms. Kaufman. Second by Ms. Rhodes. Hearing no comments, roll call, please.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel? Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1 absent. We have 3 basketball-related ones that we looked at. No, we actually have 4. Am I right there? 12 to 15. I would hear a motion to get those on the table. 12, 13, 14, and 15, and then Dr. Molnar will explain them. Ms. Rhodes makes the motion.
Second.
Second to Mr. Polonakowski. Go ahead, Doctor.
Okay, it is recommended that the board accept the resignation of Wayne Grabiak as assistant boys basketball coach, that the board hire Tim Musino as assistant boys varsity basketball coach, that the board accept the resignation of Scott Firmstone, assistant boys 7th grade basketball coach, and that the board hire Tom Satkowski as the 8th grade head middle school basketball coach and Adam McElveen as the assistant 7th grade boys basketball coach.
Comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1. Let's take the 2 volleyball. There are 2 volleyball here, 16 and 17. And would I hear a motion to adopt the 2 volleyball ones here?
I'll make a motion.
Motion, Ms. Kaufman. Second by Ms. Rhodes. Go ahead, Doctor.
It is recommended that the board accept the resignation of Sam Kaufman as the head middle school girls volleyball coach and hire Christy Bunner for the same position, head middle school girls volleyball coach.
Comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel? Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1 absent. We have 3 wrestling-related appointments here. Wrestling, 18, 19, and 20. We hear a motion to adopt the 3. Mr. Polonakowski. Mr. Beistel seconds it. Go ahead, Dr. Moore.
It's recommended that the board accept the resignation of Mike Wilde as a paid assistant high school wrestling coach and approve him as a volunteer wrestling coach. It's recommended that the board hire Steve Santia as the assistant high school wrestling coach and that the board approve Chuck Myers as a volunteer wrestling coach.
Questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Kaufman? Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1 absent. And we move to Softball, advertising for head varsity softball coach.
It's recommended that the board grant permission for the administration to advertise for a head varsity girls softball coach.
Motion of Mr. Beistel. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Alt. Comments? Roll call?
Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Yes. Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1 absent. And head varsity football coach.
It's recommended that the board retain Mr. Mark Adams as the head varsity football coach with a 3-year contract.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Benz and a second by Mr. Beistel.
And just to note, that will be at the approved supplemental rate that's in the contract.
Okay. Comments, questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Rhodes? Yes. Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Yes. Mrs. Love?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1. I think we're going to move. Is there anything else on personnel?
That's all we have under personnel. I think
All
we're
right.
ready for board reports.
Very good, thank you.
I will have a personnel item under superintendent's
Very
report.
good. And our student representatives, go ahead. One of you. Mr. Young.
Congratulations to October Sky Scholar, Heather Overly, and also congratulations to October Spirit of Southmoreland student, Sarah Brown.
YA news is as follows. Students are volunteering at Market Day once a month to help with Market Day orders. The first date was Friday, October the 11th, from 3:15 to 4:45. In regards to Buddy Day, please see the attached thank you note from Wendover Middle School, a nice reminder why these days are so special. Hobgoblin Hike was Friday, October the 18th at Mammoth Park, and the Read Across America kickoff event at the Southmoreland Primary Center was on Thursday, October 24th. For the latest updates about news and events involving YA, be sure to check the YA News Corner located outside Mr. Fabian's room, or sign up for the newsletter by contacting us at ya@southmoreland.net, or follow us on Twitter at SHSYA.
Congratulations to Ty Kinter, Michael Garlowich, and Jordan Grimm on their outstanding performance at Seton Hill University with the PMEA Honors Course.
The results for the WPIAL Cross Country Championship at Coopers Lake are as follows. Ben Bickerton ran a great race, finishing 9th place out of 213 runners. Ben had a great time of 17 minutes and 17 seconds. He qualified for the state meet in Hershey, PA. Ben also won a medal. Riley Beistel ran a great race, finishing 17th out of 200 runners. She also qualified for the state meet for the second year. The results for the PIA state results are also in. Ben ran great as well. He finished 46 out of 132 runners with a time of 17 minutes and 33 seconds. And Riley finished 84th out of 137 runners with a time of 21 minutes and 1 second.
The Random Acts of Kindness Club has jars in classrooms and is asking students to put any excess change they have into the jars, and they will be picked up on Monday, December 16th. These jars will then be given to families in need in Westmoreland County.
On Friday, November 15th, the senior class of 2014 will be having their senior breakfast and panoramic photo.
On Thursday, October 24th, the varsity cheerleaders sponsored the Fall Fling Homecoming Dance. 160 students danced to the tunes of TK to DJ and enjoyed cookies donated by the cheerleaders. The dance was a huge success.
Also, National Honor Society has begun tutoring sessions twice a week to aid and assist students who need a little extra help.
The World Affairs Institute was sponsored by the Rotary Club, and student delegates Paige Weaver and myself we went to the event and heard speakers talk about the political strife going on in Turkey right now and the implications for the surrounding countries. And then we got in small groups to see the issue from various viewpoints. The band participated in the Veterans Day Parade and Ceremony on Monday, November 11th, and mock trial recently received its case for a 2013-2014 competition and had its officers elected. Those officers are me as president, Vice President Sage Gwynn, Secretary Emily Myers, and Treasurer Michael Conway.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, where's your
Any
dance at?
questions? Oh,
So I wanted to,
questions or comments here
I wasn't sure where your dance was at. I saw
this
some
week?
pictures on Facebook, but it didn't look like it was here in the school.
It was
In the cafeteria.
Was it? Oh, okay. Good.
When the Honor Society members tutor, is that, do you take off during school, or is that after school, or how does that work?
Twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have homeroom right after fourth period, and it's a time slot of about 45 minutes, and we go in then and help tutor kids.
Very good.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Let's move to then the CWCTC report. Ms. Kaufman, this is one of the last evenings we get to
Yeah.
listen to you. So
Yeah.
take all the time you wish.
I get to go there next Wednesday as well, I guess, so I don't know if they'll forward you these minutes. In last week's packet, we all have this in our, it's like a summary of what we talk about, so,
I think they usually do forward that to me.
Yeah.
And if not, I'll come knocking on your door.
yeah, I'll come back to report. But they granted permission for one of the teachers to attend their expo and conference in Hershey that'll happen in February. They also granted permission to change their plan administrator for their 403B to a different company, to TSA Consulting, effective October. And they hired a substitute list, some people on there. And they also granted permission to accept a donation of some tools and technical books from an estate of a Charles J. Harris. So they were interested to see what kind of, because I guess there were some pretty old books from technology. So just a. And then I got an email just the other day in regard to the roofing project is about 22% complete as of today. And they've removed the old roof and started to put all the new tar paper and whatever, but they said it's 22% complete. And they have 54 days to complete that, barring the weather and all that. So things are going well with the project. And then the next meeting will be next Wednesday, the 20th.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Kaufman? Okay. The Pennsylvania School Board Association liaison? Go ahead.
A few things to report on. According to an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer, despite increased state spending, Pennsylvania needs to invest even more in their pre-K and other high-quality early learning programs. The 2013 School Readiness Program said only 15.9% of 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds had access to publicly funded pre-K programs such as Head Start, and there's another one called Pre-K Counts. A decline from 16.7% in 2012 and 17.6% in 2011. This year's budget increased funding to Head Start by $1.9 million to $39.2 million, and for the Pre-K Counts, $4.5 million, and that would bring it up to $87.2 million. Funding for the previous 2 years had been flat. The article goes on to say that children who attend a high-quality preschool are more likely to graduate from high school, have higher lifetime earnings, stay out of prison, and rely less on social services. There was another article also dealing with charter schools. The Auditor General, Eugene D. Pasquale, on Monday, and that was just this past Monday, referred questionable spending practices and a Pittsburgh charter to the FBI because a state audit this year uncovered what appears to be PA taxpayers' money going towards building a school in Ohio. Potentially criminal spending practices were found at Urban Pathways during a routine audit. Money was unaccounted for at the same time that the school was building a facility in Youngstown. Other irregularities included one board member's spouse getting a free cell phone from the school, a staff trip to Nemacolin Woodlands, and meals at pricey restaurants in Pittsburgh. And then in Harrisburg, a debate has been ongoing over the long-standing complaints that charter schools are overpaid by taxpayers and need strengthened ethics and financial disclosure laws. So that's still ongoing. They're still having that debate. So that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you for that very informative. Just check it, since we're on the State Board Association, Mr. Bentz, would you be prepared for some comments on the... Mr. Bentz was our representative at Hershey for the state. Do you mind if he just ties on to your report there? And if you're prepared there, Mr. Bentz.
Grab my stuff here.
Okay.
Some people wonder why we attend these conferences. In addition to the business meeting and voting meetings that I attend as a delegate from our school district, there are educational sessions, workshops, and other opportunities to obtain useful information to bring back to our district. I'm glad to see that we made changes that we suggested in my report from last year's conference regarding school improvement plans. This year, one of our buildings was mandated to have a school improvement plan in place. But taking my suggestion from what I learned from last year, our district decided to have all our schools take part in an improvement plan instead of just the mandated school. It should be exciting to see what changes may happen as our district is already being recognized for outstanding achievements both across the state and the nation. On Tuesday, we had the voting meeting at the delegate assembly. Some of the stuff usually just goes by very quickly. But some of the topics that were discussed in great length and had close votes were a personnel issue that addressed PESers, a school governance issue which encourages voluntary in-service education for school directors and opposes efforts to mandate training. The largest discussion was over feelings that this should be a local issue and not a state-level issue. And there was a school finance issue that was discussed that supports legislation that would restore and expand the exceptions to the back-end referendum requirements of Act 25 of 2011 and allow districts to reopen their budgets annually to reflect final state appropriations. And those were the three that were closest in votes. Most of the rest of them were not even close. It was 95% to something, but those three were very close in voting. That evening was the leadership team dinner. The featured speaker was Micah Ruzioni, the 1980 captain of the U.S. Olympic hockey team who won gold. He shared how to overcome obstacles and go for the gold. He revealed how commitment to your team in any endeavor makes you a winner. And he spoke very well on that, respecting each other and moving towards a target all together as a team and things like that. On Wednesday, they unveiled a new, let me grab it here, I actually went and asked for copies to pass around to all the members. It's a new innovation being done by PSBA. It's called PSBA Forward. They're streamlining their home office to make it more streamlined and efficient to be more member services for the members. So you can look at that pamphlet. Also, on Wednesday, the opening general session the speaker was Dr. Pedro Noguero. He talked about creating conditions for academic excellence and what it takes to leave no child behind. He spoke on poverty is not a learning disability, but the cause of poverty needs addressed. Example, if a child needs a coat, get him a coat so that they're warm and comfortable when they get to school and not freezing cold and can't concentrate on what they're learning. Show kids what they're learning and how it relates to life, and they'll be more apt to learn what you're trying to teach them. To be a teacher, it should be harder to get in and easier to get out. Don't change who you serve, but change how you serve. We must teach kids everything they need to know for their occupation. Example, if you teach a student how to become a bank executive, and later on down the road they embezzle the money, you didn't teach them everything they needed to know to be a bank executive. There's more than just the academics. There's teaching them integrity and other things like that in life. So we want to teach them everything so that they don't fail. We must build partnerships with civic groups, churches, and etc. to help in our endeavor. Kids don't get smarter from being tested and assessments. They become smarter by being taught. Early intervention is easier than later intervention. And that was just some of the topics that he talked about. Then there is a session on the PSERS, funding and reform, how changes will impact your district. The speaker talked about the governor's plan, Senate Bill 922, House Bill 1350, and on the PSBA website, if you go to the conference and click on handouts, there's, I think it was 77 pages of different information and data from that particular session. And then there's another featured workshop called Building the Capacity of Schools to Meet Student Needs. Some of the things I drew out of this were, he referred to leadership, there was a book referred to called Leadership on the Line. It was written by Ron Heifetz. The next thing I got out of it was, if you can't explain your plan, people will not buy into your plan. He also discussed an elementary school in Emerson, Texas, I believe, and they had a thing going on there where every student in the school had an IEP, not just the students who by state law had to have an IEP. And every parent got a copy of that IEP so that everyone was on the same page, the parents, the teachers, the school, and everyone. We need to train teachers so communication with parents is a dialogue, not a one-way communication. If need be, bring parents in for sample mock dialogue. Parents need to take ownership to help educate. Here's a great point. We have further development for teachers. Maybe we need to offer that opportunity to parents. A great example of that is I was talking to a parent once who, when they were in school a long time ago, they took the business classes, they took stuff like that, and they didn't take geometry and algebra and stuff like that. So when their child got to where they were taking those classes, they were not able to help their child. But if we had online courses or classes that we offered to parents who want to learn so that they can help their kids, then there again, we're working as a team where the parents can help at home also when the students are struggling. Clear understanding of student needs, not only academically but non-academically. So we need to know what their needs are also outside of school and academics. Kids involved in extracurriculars are more successful because they are engaged in the school environment and atmosphere. He discussed how a school that he knew about where every student chose a club or extracurricular to be involved. It was mandated by the school. He also talked about a school. Peggy, if you're taking notes, I have a copy of this for you.
Awesome, thanks, Mike.
Sorry.
Now you tell me. Start over.
He also discussed a school district where anyone caught in a fight is automatically on the wrestling team with no choice. Next educational session was designing successful superintendent evaluations, and since we just worked with that last year and went over some different ones and kept tweaking different things and things like that, I just thought I'd sit on that class and I got some information from that, and there's so much there that I need to look over it again. I'll probably talk with Dr. Molnar and, see what he thinks of some of the information, but some of the information was, according to Act 141 of 2012, the superintendent and the assistant superintendent must be evaluated. The boards must post on their district website the performance standards for the evaluation, and then after the evaluation is done, if the superintendent and assistant superintendent met those standards, and it must be posted on the website. The evaluations are between the board and the superintendent. On Thursday, there was an educational session on financial reporting, how to make it accessible and understandable to your constituency and your people that you deal with out in the community, in the clubs around the area, the Rotary, in different places like that, so they can understand it. Next session, there's so much information there, I just couldn't even start to write it down, so I can go through that and talk to Bill or Dr. Molnar or whoever. I'm sorry. Jim, long day. Next educational session was successful leaders and baseball stars. You're not a leader if you have no followers. Education is a serious business, but you don't have to look serious to be successful. Successful superintendents and board members are enthusiastic, positive, and happy to be doing what they are doing, and they show it. Growth only comes with change, but change brings conflict. Thus, many people avoid change to avoid conflict. Occasionally, an error will happen. When it does, learn from it and do not make excuses. Accept the blame the same way you should accept the credit for a good play. The next educational session was why financial education should be required in Pennsylvania schools. On average, coming out of 4 years of college, the average student loan is over $38,000 and the average credit card debt is over $4,000. So many students do not understand the common terms and vocabulary of financial education, and I'm not talking about economics. I'm talking about if you go to take out a loan, like a prime example that they used was so many kids have cell phones nowadays, but they don't understand when you go to buy a cell phone, you need to fill out a contract. There could be interest rates, there could be term limits, and things like that. And so many kids don't understand all these terms that we need to start educating the kids so that they don't get into debt when they get older and they have more understanding of all those terms. I discussed how some schools have a local credit union or bank that have a branch located inside the school run by the students to give a real hands-on teaching experience. 44 high schools have student-run credit unions backed by a local credit union in Pennsylvania. Kids need to understand the terminology involved in making a substantial purpose. As I said, buying a cell phone and different things involved with that, or buying a car when they get older, buying a house, things like that. They discussed a reality fair for students. They discussed how students choose an occupation. Then they receive an imaginary amount of money that matches that occupation. Then they are asked, do you want to rent a house or buy a house? They're asked, do you want to buy or lease a car, etc., etc. Then they see, after taxes and all these expenses, how much money is really left. Economics is different than personal finance. And they said, and there's also been studies done by the governor's office, that's 3 of the presenters in this group were from that study done by the governor's office. But this class should be mandatory and also a graduation requirement. A standalone or blended in, but a standalone is preferable. And here again, there's a whole lot of handouts. I have some of myself, and are also on the PSBA website. There was the student simulated school board meeting, the school leadership banquet. That speaker was Captain Richard Phillips, who was the captain that was overcome by the Somali pirates, and he was kept hostage until he was rescued. And he talked about his experience and how it can relate to being a leader and also a leader in your district and working in the school district with the students. And on Friday, the closing general session, The featured speaker was Caitlin Roig. She was one of the teachers at Sandy Hook Elementary, and she talked about her day of when the gunman came in and what she did with the students, and just her experience there and how you can apply it to what you learn, not only when your school is taken over and you're trying to protect these kids, but just how you can apply some of this stuff to the daily times of teaching your kids and working with them in the district. So it wasn't only a safety thing, but it was a belief thing. And the mantra of that school is, I can, we can, you can, because we can. And an interesting thing that they started was, I guess, people were bringing in gifts for the kids just to help them feel better after this incident. And finally, the teacher had the idea, we're getting all these gifts for us. We need to give back. So after they got some of these gifts, they contacted some other elementary kids, and they re-gifted these gifts to this other school, and it's just become contagious and is catching on. And there's also another site of some things that have come out of this, and the website for that is classes4classes.org. And
maybe we should pause here. Were you about finished? Because
Yeah, just-
people have questions, and you've really given us a comprehensive report here.
just to let everybody know, I have copies of the poster and essay contest if you want to see any of that. And I have this for Dr. Molnar. It's one of the vendors who have how do school libraries help Pennsylvania students achieve academic success? If you could pass it on to one of the librarians or whoever. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Usually several of us go to this, it's over here at Hershey, and so here, I guess, Mr. Bent, you gave us 4 days here in 15 minutes here, or whatever. Questions, comments, anyone have? Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. All right, Dr. Molnar?
Sure.
And you had some issues, I think, to bring to us, too.
Yeah, I have some personnel items that we had actually discussed last week. You had a paper on your desks last week, and we just neglected to get it onto the agenda. But we're recommending that the board employ Daniel Augustine and Richard Blureau as substitute van drivers and school security personnel, that the board employ Larry J. Mull as a substitute custodian and member of the school security staff, and that the board employ Jack Taylor as a member of the school security staff. All of these would be pending receipt of remaining clearances.
Mr. Polankowski makes the motion. To have a second by Ms. Kaufman. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Rhodes?
Yes.
Mr. Alt?
Yes.
Mr. Beistel?
Yes.
Mr. Benz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kaufman? Mrs. Love? Mr. Polakowski?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, and that passes 8-0 and 1. These hires.
I had a question last week posed to me, and I just thought that the rest of you might be interested in the response too. But the question was in terms of how many of our students or what percentage of our students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. We get a count every month from the dietary department that gives us those figures. So our figures as of October 31st, 42% of our high school kids are eligible for either free or reduced lunch. At the middle school, the number is 47%. At Southmoreland Elementary, 48%. And at the primary center, 53%. And when that's all aggregated across the district, 47% of the students across the district are eligible for free and reduced lunch. It's a pretty high percentage as things go. So that information I was just passing along because that question had been posed to me. We received a couple of letters today. The first one we received was from the Westmoreland County Food Bank, thanking our community for its efforts toward the food bank's Tackle Hunger food drives. This year, our schools were able to collect 1,065 pounds of food during that drive. Over the past 3 years, the food drive has actually collected more than 13,000 pounds of food. So that's a lot of food to feed hungry people in Westmoreland County. And I'm pleased to announce that Southmoreland has again won the coveted Golden Soup Can Traveling Trophy, and that's on display in the high school office, right, guys? Yeah, I think you bow before it every day as you go in, right? So we're quite proud of that accomplishment, because it just demonstrates, we've had it for several years now, but it just demonstrates the generosity that this community shows. We also received another letter today from the Consortium for Public Education. I'd like to read that letter to you. Dear Dr. Molnar, enclosed, please find a donation in the amount of $100,000 to the Southmoreland School District from the Educational Incentive Tax Credit Program via the Scottdale Bank and Trust Company. The consortium is happy to send you these funds as an approved educational improvement organization in the EITC program. The consortium is approved to accept funds that enhance student leadership, career exploration, and literacy development, so we ask you to use these dollars accordingly. We are proud of the Scottdale Bank and Trust Company for investing in the important job of public education. Best wishes for excellent use of those funds. We hope they are helpful in achieving the challenging goals you have set for your students. We would very much like to receive a brief summary of how you used your donation, as well as reactions to your expenditures brought from students, families, staff, or board members. And that's signed Executive Director Linda Croushore. So they say they're proud of the Scottdale Bank and Trust Company. So are we. This organization has donated thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars through this EITC program over the years. And as I was reading this letter today, I thought that it might be interesting in a future month to bring you a report historically of the things we've been able to accomplish with the money that we've received from through Scottdale Bank and Trust that otherwise we would not have been able to accomplish. We use all of these monies to supplement rather than supplant. In other words, we purchase things and implement programs that we would not be able to do just on a regular budget. So we certainly extend our thanks and appreciation to our partners, the Scottdale Bank and Trust Company, for all that they've done for our students over the years. The next item I have for you is actually Mr. Marnell. I've asked Mr. Marnell to provide a brief, broad brush overview, is what I'm calling it, of the 2014-15 budget process. Jim?
Thank you. I put together some quick talking points in the form of a PowerPoint-looking document. Sorry I don't have the computer and projector here, but it's a PowerPoint that we can build on as we go along. But I'm going to enjoy working very closely this year with Dr. Molnar, Dr. Scott, and the administrators and support staff in developing our 2014-15 budget. We're just looking broadly right now, just starting to discuss, to accumulate information on revenues, expenditures, taxes, etc. This is just the kickoff, so to speak, of our budget development for next year. I also passed out some handouts to go along with this. One of them is the Act 1 timeline, sort of like the playbook for budget development and other important items as we go through the budgeting season. When we do complete the first draft of the budget, obviously we're going to strive to make it as accurate as possible, given the facts that we will know at that time. Obviously, at this time, we don't know what the state, the governor has in mind, and those facts and assumptions we will build in as we go along. I think the first item we need to consider with this Act 1 timeline is, do we want to utilize doing an early budget for Act 1 purposes, or do we want to opt out of the Act 1 timeline process and commit ourselves to living within the Act 1 index? One of the handouts is a copy of our Act 1 index for this year, which is 2.9%. And you also have a listing of all the other school districts in the county, and on the back of that page is the history of the Act 1 index. 2.9% would allow you to raise taxes to that limit if you choose to opt out of using the Act 1 timeline. And there's a sample of the resolution to do just that. That would have to be passed by the end of January. In fact, January 30th would be the deadline to either opt out or make an Act 1 budget available for public inspection. Of course, we're going to be working closely with our departments, gathering all the information that we can to make an accurate budget, consumer price information, insurance information, staffing, salaries tied to contracts, benefits tied to contracts. We know that we have the retirement board situation that looms for all of us. That rate's going up for us from nearly 8.5% to 10.7% next year, or a 26% increase in retirement costs. We don't know yet what we might be looking at as far as health insurance increase. That's controlled by our health consortium. So there's a lot of unknown items that we have to assess, gather information on in order to prepare an accurate first draft budget. I'm not going to read all the bullet points here. Again, I want to apologize for quickly throwing this PowerPoint together today, but I just wanted to get our thoughts to start focusing on the 14-15 budget season. We've got 7 months and 16 days to pass a final budget, so now's the time to get started. I know internally, started talking with the building secretaries. They're eager for us to continue to learn and utilize the computer software program that you have invested in through the CSIU. There's some good tools in there, so we will be utilizing that program. And just want to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Any questions?
I really appreciate you bringing this, Mr. Marnell and Dr. Molnar, because in many ways, December is our reorganization month, so we won't be doing anything. And I realize it'll be 7 of us around here and 2 new, but to start thinking, because January we have 2 meetings in January, and are very crucial to think of budget issues, and so it's helpful to get us into our thinking here, the issues, and we'll be making some decisions in January. Any questions or comments to? No.
Last year, we signed the Act 1, didn't we?
We stayed, well, last year we did not raise taxes at all.
Right.
So we did sign the resolution to stay within the index the year before, and we also stayed within the index. To my knowledge, we've not sought exceptions since the inception of Act 1.
The Act 1 timeline came from the PASBO website, and the KKAL version are the initials of the law firm that works with the PSBA, Kagel, Klein, Elmi, and Lord. And I know that'll turn on our solicitor there when he hears those long legal names and see sample resolution forms.
One of the members sat near me at the workshop.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jim.
You're welcome.
The last item I have, Mr. President, is tonight we bid farewell to 2 of our outgoing school board members. Being a member of a local school board is often a thankless job, and we know that, and you all know that probably better than anyone. It requires a great deal of your time and a great deal of your effort. Large elections, the presidential election, the gubernatorial election, senatorial, Senate races, they draw a lot more media attention and usually a larger voter turnout. But what a lot of people fail to realize is that school board members probably have the greatest direct influence on their communities, both in terms of taking care of the business of education and the levying of taxes. Decisions that board members make often draw either the praise or the ire of their friends and neighbors, and in some cases their families. So Mrs. Kaufman and Dr. Fike have served in their respective positions for the last 4 years, and it's my privilege this evening to thank them both for their dedication and their service. And we have a plaque, and I will read Mrs. Kaufman's plaque to you. It says, Josie Kaufman, outgoing board member, in recognition of your outstanding dedication and willing service to the students and citizens of the Southmoreland School District 2013. Mrs. Kaufman, we certainly thank you for all that you've done for this board. That concludes my report, sir.
All right. Ms. Kaufman, any comments here? Welcome them.
Thank you. I just wanted to again thank you for you guys here, for everything you've done here for the Southmoreland and for the citizens who supported me during these last 4 years. The time's gone by so quickly, and I've learned so much and met really some wonderful people. It's been an honor and a privilege to be part of this district during this time, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity that the citizens gave me. I know that the next few years here for you all is going to be very challenging with the budget and the test scores, but I'm certain that you all work together for the good of the kids and you'll be able to make the best decisions possible. One more time for myself for congratulations for the elementary, middle school, and the primary center for all their awards. And I look forward to the near future reading in the paper about the high school. So I'm certain that that's going to happen, and we have amazing teachers and staff, and I believe in them. So thank you again for the last 4 years. Good luck to you guys. And I'll see you around. That's not the last of me, so thank you.
Thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
We would adjourn to executive session for personnel
okay.
and
Very
litigation.
Very good. Any other comments, any board member or wanted to? Yes, Ms. Rivers.
I just wanted to thank Mrs. Kaufman for her compassion, her insight, and her integrity these last 4 years. It's been great serving with you, and hopefully we'll see you around the table maybe in the future. I wish you all the good luck, and thanks again. We're going to miss you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Alt.
If I might just take a second.
Sure.
Although Dr. Feig isn't here, I would personally like to thank her and to say that I think that the definition of a school director is Dr. Feig. Someone that put the time and the research in, wasn't afraid to bring it in. I will miss her at my side here, and but I did get a new good friend. So I thank Dr. Feig.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I had indicated that I was going to request a brief executive session to discuss our tax litigation with 220 Bessemer Road Investors, which is number 6179 of 2012.
Okay.
And we will also have a personnel matter to briefly discuss as well.
Okay. There's a motion to adjourn to executive session, and I see a second over here by Mr. Beistel. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. And the ayes have it, and we are adjourned.
We're not coming back.